Look, you don't struggle because you're incapable. You struggle because you're highly capable. You think quickly, you solve problems, you anticipate outcomes, you optimize your life. But here's the quiet cost, my friend. When everything becomes manageable, very little feels mysterious. And without mystery, awe begins to disappear. In this episode, we're exploring why gifted women often lose their sense of wonder and how to reclaim it without becoming less competent. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Power to Flourish podcast, where science meets the art of a beautiful life. I'm Dr. Andrea Line, positive psychologist, giftedness expert and coach, and modern-day spiritual godmother to brilliant, deep-feeling women. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space to come back to yourself. Each week, we'll explore the emotional experience of gifted, sensitive women and what it means to live a life that feels as beautiful as it may look. Because flourishing isn't a luxury, it's your birthright, and your life is waiting. This is the Power to Flourish podcast. So let's talk about awe. Not in a sentimental way, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeply psychological way. I did speak briefly on this last week, but I will just repeat it here in case you didn't listen. Awe is that experience of encountering something vast, something beautiful, complex, or meaningful enough that your current mental framework has to stretch to accommodate it. Take a moment right now and think. We all have these moments where maybe it was on a trip to the Grand Canyon, which I have not been to yet, but I hear that's a very natural place to have this feeling. Maybe it was in a museum. There's so many times and places it could happen if you're open to it. But just take a moment. When was the last time you had this feeling of awe? Here's what's fascinating. Awe isn't just emotional, though it is. It's physiological. It widens our perception and it reduces self-focused rumination. It increases our vagal tone, which is associated with nervous system flexibility and regulation. And I talked some about that last week as well. But in other words, awe doesn't just inspire you, it regulates you. Is that not amazing? It seems like, wow, what a side benefit. And that is why its quiet disappearance matters. And my heart for you and why I am recording this episode today is because I want you to reconnect to this. If you feel like you are living life and it feels just a little dull or a little gray and you're missing the color, this is a pathway to that place. So listen up. If you're a gifted woman, you don't lose awe because you stop caring, right? Usually, gifted women lose awe because they become exceptionally good at managing life. Is that you? When you are highly capable, you tend to live slightly ahead of the present moment. Your brain is working fast. You're always planning ahead. Again, I find myself in this place a lot of the time. You're anticipating, you're planning, you're evaluating, you solve. They're all great things. But if we're not careful, very slowly, almost imperceptibly, life shifts from something to experience to something to manage or even optimize. I try to be very careful about the language I use because on the one hand, I think a lot of what I talk about could be seen through the lens of optimization, but optimization, just for the sake of optimization, to me isn't really living a full, rich life. And I don't want to just optimize for the sake of optimizing. I want to live life. I want to experience life. The nervous system adapts to speed and the mind adapts to mastery. And when everything starts to feel, really familiar and explainable and like we can wrap our head around it, which is what we naturally want to be able to do, right? Because we don't like to feel like we can't explain things. We don't like uncertainty. So we want to be certain and we want to understand everything. But when we do that, Very little feels vast. I mean, think about when you were little. Part of I think what is fun, or at least for me, what's really fun about being around little kids is that the world is so new and they're seeing it all through these new little eyes. And I love watching a 3-year-old go through the world. I love it. There's something about that age in particular, like it's just fresh, because they don't understand everything and their brains haven't mastered everything. And that is a beautiful place to be because awe requires spaciousness. It requires moments where you're not extracting value or producing, some profound insight or solving a big problem. It just requires encountering. That's what it requires. And a little child knows how to do that. They know how to do it so much better than we do. High capacity women, in my experience, personally and professionally, rarely allow interruption, like real interruption in life. We do not like those kinds of interruptions, right? It's just, no, we don't want that. And I don't think it's because we're rigid, although we can be, but competence and knowing and planning and having it all like solved out like 5 months in advance or more, it helps to keep us safe. It's a feeling of safety. I would say it's an illusion of safety, but our brain doesn't know the difference. Our brain doesn't care. It loves that feeling of safety. So why does awe disappear, especially for gifted women? Research tells us that awe requires 2 things. It's a sense of vastness and a moment where our existing mental frameworks have to stretch. It interrupts our cognitive autopilot. And again, gifted women, we tend to live in cognitive mastery. So it makes sense that if that's where we like to live, even if on the one hand, maybe emotionally, we're like, oh no, we would love to have our cognitive autopilot interrupted because gosh, it feels horrendous being in that place all the time. But we do have to be willing. We do have to be willing to have it interrupted. When everything becomes understandable and manageable and optimizable, like I said, very little feels mysterious. So just think about your life right now. In the things that you think about on a day-to-day basis, does it feel like there's a lot of mystery? Mystery is the doorway to awe. It's the doorway. And there are a few dynamics at play. I want to just briefly go over some of them with you today so you can just sort of think through the way you're living life right now. And if this sounds like something like, oh, I would love to have the doorway to awe opened, think about these dynamics. First one is overstimulation. We are constantly, I include myself, constantly consuming information. There's no limit to the information we can consume. You're consuming information right now on this podcast. We have podcasts, and we have YouTube, we have articles, and we have social media, and we have just normal everyday conversations, and just no limit. Second, evaluation mode. Many gifted women experience the world through assessment, evaluating. Is this useful? Is this good? Is this the best thing? I mean, I literally was, how on Instagram, the algorithm, it's always shooting like something for you to click on to buy. And I find myself on this bunny trail, like off whatever I was doing, who knows? And I'm like looking, it's literally a dispenser to hold your medications or your supplements or whatever. It was really, really cute, by the way. I'm going to buy it. But I'm like looking at all the variations, and it wasn't even like there were that many variations. It's a pill holder. Like, how many variations can there be? And still, right, I'm like looking at this like, is this the best version? Is this exactly what I need? But what about this? And I'm like thinking through all the things. Is this worth my time? Is this worth my money? Right? These are just normal ways of our brain's working, evaluation mode. But awe requires surrender, and it requires lingering without extracting value or evaluating or judging in some way, shape, or form. We have to find a way in these moments to like tap that button of our brain off. And I know for some of us it's easier said than done. And the third thing I want to bring your attention to is this chronic future orientation. When you're highly capable, you are often living slightly ahead of the present moment. If you're being honest with yourself, right? We're planning, we're anticipating, we're solving. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and she said, so cute. Her daughter is turning 1 this summer. As I record this, it's March, early March. And she already has the 1-year birthday party planned. In fact, she was planning it while she was pregnant. She's a gifted woman. If I ever knew one, she is a gifted woman. I hope she's listening right now. But that's what we do, right? We plan, we anticipate. We're solving problems that haven't even come up yet. And, it's like our superpower. It's awesome. However, it is awesome in some circumstances, but for awe, if you want to open the doorway to awe, that isn't the doorway it's going to come through. Because awe lives in the now. It cannot be pre-scheduled. It cannot be planned for in advance. It cannot be optimized. It literally can only be encountered. It is an encounter. It is an embodied experience of surrendering to that moment. And finally, there is identity. When competence becomes central to who you are, interruption feels inefficient. But awe requires interruption. And high capacity, gifted women rarely allow for interruption. So what is the cost? What is the cost? When awe diminishes in our life, something subtle begins to shift. You may not feel anxious necessarily, or you may not be aware of feeling anxious. You may not identify necessarily as being depressed or feeling depressed. And it may not be that extreme. But life can begin to feel flatter, narrower, maybe like a little more mechanical. I like to think of it as like, what's the movie? The Wizard of Oz. Why couldn't I think of that? You have the black and white part of this is the original movie. You have the black and white version and then it goes to color. When we're living in this other place, it's like we're just living in the black and the white and the grays. Like it's manageable. You can live life that way. You can live life that way your whole life, and maybe not even know the difference. But once you have a taste of the color, it's really hard to just go back to living in the black and white. And because gifted women are so capable, they often respond to all of that flattening, that, like that narrowing of life with more effort. It's like, oh, now I have a problem to solve. So I need to do more. I need to optimize more. I need to improve it. I need to do more. All the efforting. But in my opinion, it's not more effort. Like I said, that's not what's going to open the door. It's more expansion. It's more experience. It's more surrender. So, how do we gently reclaim awe without totally dismantling our competence or these parts of our identity, these strengths that we have? Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. The first practice, I'm going to give you 3. The first practice is de-optimization. I want you to de-optimize. This is fun because whoever talks about de-optimizing, 1 experience per day. I want you to do something. I don't care what it is. You're going to do it without extracting value from it. Like you're doing it not for some other greater purpose. We are de-optimizing. Maybe you're listening to music and you're literally sitting there just listening to music. You're not multitasking. You are not doing anything else. You are soaking in the music and just listening to it. Maybe it's going for a walk and you're not going to track your steps. Like, we live in a world today where everything is optimized, which can be really helpful, but I think sometimes we get a little crazy about it. Maybe here's one for some of you who cannot not take pictures of every aspect of your life and post it on Instagram. Or even if you don't post it on Instagram, maybe today or sometime this week, you look at something or you experience something beautiful or meaningful. Maybe it's a moment with your kids without taking a picture of it. You're just going to have that moment. You're not trying to extract any additional value out of it except for what it is. Awe returns when evaluation pauses, right? Okay, the second practice is sensory slowing. So I want you to choose one sensory input and stay with it fully. Again, it's a little similar to what I just said. It could be sound, color, texture, taste. What's the other sensory? Sound, color, smell. And I stay with it longer than is efficient. Longer than is efficient. So what might that be? What comes to my mind right now is I'm thinking about when I'm petting my dog. She has very curly, soft fur. She's an Australian copper dog. They're hypoallergenic and they don't shed. And I love her dearly for that. And I love petting her and like running my fingers through her curly little hair. And, again, just like a child, like just allowing myself to get lost in petting her, maybe longer than makes sense, whatever that means. That's what comes to my mind. Okay. And the third practice I want to invite you to try is deliberate small exposure to beauty. Deliberate exposure to beauty. So, what do I mean by that? What I mean is you don't have to travel to the Grand Canyon to experience awe. It does not have to require a pilgrimage. We certainly can experience those things. I have a memory of when I was in Maui as the sun was setting and it caught us off guard. We had to pulled off the side of the road for some of the reason. And as we got out, the sun was going down and everyone was standing on the edge of this cliff looking over the ocean. It was the most breathtaking, just the whole experience. But that was a pilgrimage. That was 5,000 miles away from where I live. I am asking you this week to not book a trip that requires you to travel. Doesn't require travel. It does require, however, your attention. And oftentimes when we're traveling, right, our attention, so we're out of that autopilot mode, which makes it easier. So maybe you try other ways to get out of autopilot mode this week. Maybe you take a different way, something novel, right? So what could this be that doesn't require the pilgrimage? Maybe it's 5 minutes of art of some sort. Maybe you stop by a museum visit. It doesn't even have to be long. Again, maybe it's listening to a piece of instrumental music played all the way through. These deliberate, small exposures to beauty. The nervous system remembers how to widen when we give it something worthy of widening for. So in closing today, I just want to encourage you. You do not need to become less of you, less gifted, less intense, less intelligent, less planning to feel alive. You don't have to abandon that part of yourself, thank goodness. However, you do need to let yourself be interrupted again. You may need to just give yourself permission. you may need to loosen the reins a little bit in certain areas. Because I don't believe awe is childish by any means, but I do think children hold a key for us to remember, because we all were at that place at one point in our life, and we just get caught up in the everyday. Awe is just one of those ways your nervous system expands beyond survival and into aliveness. And I think so many of us, whether we articulate it or admit it to ourselves or not, we want to live fully alive. Do we not? I do. I spent many years, much of my life in survival mode. I do not want to stay in that place. And for many gifted women, reclaiming wonder is really not about doing more. This is not an episode. Please don't take this and now I have to do a lot more. It's about receiving. It's about widening again. It's about leaning into the mystery. It's really about letting beauty guide you back to aliveness. So a few questions just to reflect on as I wrap up. Ask yourself, when did I last feel stopped or interrupted by something? What stopped me in my tracks? What environments make awe possible for me? Because we're all different. Different things are going to catch our attention. And lastly, where have I replaced wonder with efficiency? And be honest with yourself. You don't need to become less capable to feel alive. You just need to let yourself be interrupted by beauty again. I hope this episode awakened something in you, just a reminder that all of these things, again, are not luxuries. They're not things I believe that we have to get all our work done first, and then we can enjoy these things. These are the very things that are going to expand us and help us do the other things well. So prioritize this for yourself this week. I hope you have a beautiful week. I'll see you right back here next Tuesday. And until then, keep flourishing, my friend. Thank you for listening to the Power to Flourish podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling more seen, more supported, and more deeply connected to yourself. And if this episode resonated, would you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways to help this work reach the women who need it most. You'll find show notes, links, and resources from today's episode at powertoflourish.com. And now just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional support. And listening doesn't make me your therapist or doctor, though if you're looking for a coach, you know where to find me. All right, beautiful one, that's it for now. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your gifts, and keep flourishing.